Hain. I've been very excited about this. Looking forward to interviewing you. When I interviewed Dan Chalope, I said, who else should I interview? And you were the first name he said. So I thought we'll get to you as quickly as we can. You bring so many different aspects to the school. You've been a former parent. You've been our director of sports, a long-serving staff member, mentor to so many people. So really looking forward to hearing about it. But as beauty of a podcast is you can go anywhere. We can go anywhere. But let's go right back to the start. And what's your first memory growing up? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a kind of a grammar school turned the early comprehensive back then in a little country town in Devon, England. I loved playing soccer, and then when I went to the senior school, started doing rugby as well. In the English system, in some schools you can play soccer and rugby. In some schools, it's just rugby, and in some of the state schools, it's just soccer. So I was lucky to try both, and ended up when I was 18 playing county football as a goalkeeper, and also county as a rugby player.
Give us a modern day rugby player. Bryan Hain can be from any country or a student that people listening to this might know. Who's Bryan Hain as a young guy? Is he thinking back to some of those famous English rugby players? Is it a barnstorming centre? What's the...
I tell you what's really funny, because when I was growing up and the World Cup started, Andrew Slack was someone that I admired in the centre. All right, I wasn't very good at kicking the ball, but I was good defensively and good hands, not that fast. I don't want to exaggerate how good I was. I had leadership qualities that someone picked, and I've often thought about that when we pick captains here. Someone picked me as captain of football, captain of rugby, captain at college, captain at the club. So somebody saw something in me, but it was going back to that player, actually then meeting Andrew Slack and thinking that there's someone I watched on TV and I admired the way he played the game from Australia. Little did I know that one day I'd be in Australia and I'm talking to him at a sports breakfast luncheon.
We won't get too far ahead because we'll get to you coming to Australia. So you had a very English upbringing by the sounds of it, very similar, I guess, to the private schools in Australia, I suppose, but very English sports. Any cricket in there?
No, to be honest, I was a wicket keeper. A lot of goalkeepers went wicket keepers. But I kind of learnt that I wasn't good enough to open the batting. And then sometimes I'd just be the wicket keeper, and I wasn't very good at bowling, but I also swam. So I ended up just being a lifeguard at my local pool and earning some money at 15, 16 in the summer months, and then just played footy in the other two. But my dad really wasn't into the traditional sports. He was a motorbike man, scrambler, racing motorbikes. So I kind of had that in my DNA as well.
It's a bit of everything. So I should know my geography a bit better having married someone from the UK, but Devon's the bootleg,
Yep.
The UK, near Cornwall.
Yeah, right next to Cornwall.
Actually, set up behind you is a surfboard.
Yeah.
It's not set up there. So that you would have been at a lifeguard at the beach as well as pool?
No, not at the beach. Now, I did try surfing, and I kind of learned that I just didn't have that balance. I went many times surfing in the local beaches, and I just didn't master the skill. And it was probably, I'm a bit of a wuss. It was a bit cold, and we'd have to drive an hour to get to the beach. So if there was no surf, that was no good. So no.
Well, there you go. So what kind of student's Bryan Hain? You're fully involved with everything on the outside the classroom. What kind of student was Bryan Hain? Was he diligent? Was he...
Let's say that I had to work hard to get the grades to get to university. I was more of a practical person, but I got on well with a lot of the teachers, and probably that's where I got on so well with the PE teachers. It was a time in England when England was twinning with cities in France, and the PE teachers took trips away to France at that when I was in the sixth form. So I went to help, and I kind of went, all right, this is unreal. This is like, I love travel, taking kids away, exploring a new country. That's stayed with me. And a funny story, which kind of sums up a lot of PE teachers taking trips away, is that we packed the trailer and the minibus, and we were going to drive to France, middle of France, and set up the tent. So when the students came on the bus the day later, we would basically have everything set up. And the two PE teachers get in the bus. There I am, sixth form student, and we went to Poole to drive out of the school, and the minibus wasn't strong enough to get out of the schoolyard. And I was thinking, this is an adventure. We haven't even got out of the school and we're stuck, you know. But anyway, we solved it and got there. But that was my first adventure as someone who was potentially going to be a teacher.
I suspect workplace health and safety wasn't as big a thing as it is
No.
too, but you have a lot of fun. So we've done a few ourselves. But so that kind of led me into the next question was going to be, how did you fall into PE teaching or university, full stop? So you finished school, get your A levels, good enough score into university
Yeah.
locally, or where'd you go?
I went to I went to interview at Loughborough, but I was actually persuaded to go to a small specialist PE college because my PE teacher went at St Paul's, Cheltenham, and he said, "Great city, great place, middle Gloucester, Bristol, Cheltenham, lovely place, great rugby area," and that's where I went. Which is kind of funny because I went back there 6 months ago with my wife to show St Paul's off, and it is actually an identical copy almost of TSS, the clock tower. The only difference is that the tennis courts, the grass tennis courts, were straight in front of the clock tower. And we used to play, we were only allowed to play on the grass tennis courts unless we were in the team for 2 weeks of the year. And you know, and other than that, the chapel was bigger than our chapel, but the dining room and all the rooms exactly like Delpro.
Not sure school council would let me move the tennis courts up to the tell me more, but we could give it a whirl. So university, we're jumping around a little bit, moving pretty quickly. How did you end up in Hong Kong?
Yeah. So basically, I finished university and I went over to the States. I picked up a knee injury fairly early, an anterior cruciate injury, and there really wasn't a cure for it then. So the knee used to move a bit. But I went to the States to play rugby, and a mate of mine was playing on a golf circuit. So we went to the States for 6 months, and then my club back in England said, "Hey, there's a teaching position. You know, we're interested in getting you to come back there." Well, I played 2 seasons for Plymouth Albion, and then my knee went again, and I went at 25. Right, I'm just going to apply for jobs overseas, and ended up getting a job. I went by 3 or 4 interviews, ended up getting a job in Hong Kong. And I honestly, at that time, would not have been able to pick where it was on the map, but I'm going overseas.
It's like throwing a dart at a dartboard. So we touched on, I know you love your motorbikes. You touched on mum and dad. What were their names, by the way?
Edwin and Anne.
Edwin and Anne, how did they accept the fact that their young son playing a bit of rugby locally is now heading halfway across the world?
Yeah, so my dad grew up in the town, ran a family business in the town, hardly ever went overseas. I don't think he ever went overseas, all right? Isle of Man TT to watch the motorbike races. Mum, I can still remember Mum's voice trailing off saying, "Oh, that's great news, you've got a job in Hong Kong." But on the other hand, I kind of felt like Dad was always supportive of everything I did and just says, you know, you need to keep making a move. You know, there's so many opportunities overseas.
Certainly took those opportunities. So then, brothers and sisters?
A sister, yeah. My sister is still back in Newquay, the centre of surfing in the southwest. You know, she's still there, 2 kids, and you know, sort of made a life in the West Country. To be honest, I think it's sliding. I say it's sliding doors because I think if I hadn't have got injured, I was quite happy working in Plymouth, but I wasn't ready to start coaching at 25, and I had the travel bug a bit.
Yeah, there's something I'd say this a lot in the UK. People do, they're very loyal and they do stay in their towns and their jobs for long, long periods of time. So your sister went west, you went east. What was the school you first went to?
So it's called South Island School. South Island School. And it's kind of funny. We were all on the plane together, about 30 of us, remained friends. Billy Mason, still in Hong Kong. We remained friends forever. I stayed there for 12 years, thought I was only going to stay there for a 2-year contract. It was just a great place to grow up. But also, you meet so many people that are either great businessmen, sportsmen, that are passing through. Still friends with, I would say, 20 odd people, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, people in Australia that I met in that time.
Expats everywhere and all sorts of jobs as well.
All sorts of jobs.
CEOs, teachers, pretty lucrative job back then. Teaching, low taxes, must have been great years. Must have been.
Oh, yeah, I met like my head of PE. It's funny how you explain this because we're in the pavilion at the moment, looking out to the ovals, and I'm watching the groundsman. We were teaching in a place that was a bit like Gregory Terrace, I suppose, built upwards. But the head of PE then, Dave Reed, said we must have 8 lessons on grass a year. So we used to book the grass in the middle of Happy Valley. We used to get on the bus. I did this probably 4 or 5 times a day, get on the bus, drive down, pick the teams on the bus, run out. We'd have 45 minutes on grass, run back, then get the next class down. And I go 8 lessons on grass because Dave says we're an English education system and they must play their sport on grass at some stage.
So if they're not on grass, they're on concrete?
They're on concrete, yeah. Concrete, and this is actually, now you brought it up, there's a couple of things, is I remember when I was there, maybe it might have been the second or third year, and there was no mobiles, I think, back then, and a fixture was changed. And the boys used to make their own way to fixtures afterwards because it would take so long to get on a bus, to get to the ground at 4:30. And I remember ringing them to say, look, the game is not on tomorrow, it's on the next day. And every single boy picked up the phone after school and answered me. So I rang 15 boys and they were all in their apartments. And I kind of went, wow, if I did that in England or Australia, it is unlikely that everybody would be in an apartment. So I kind of felt from then on, I'm going to do more activities and give them more opportunity to be out training and become better sportsmen than my predecessor, if you know what I mean. I want them to have the best opportunity because their parents have got an expat job in Hong Kong, and I want to do something for them.
It's just a completely different lifestyle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just concrete jungle wherever you go. The Hong Kong Sevens must have been highlight. Like, I know it's changed a lot, but we've taken a few tours from here over there. They must have been good fun years as well, taking the kids along to them. Probably you had students even probably play or time entertainment.
Yeah, they did the halftime South Island School. Sometimes it would be the island, Hong Kong Island versus Kowloon side. And I'm still mates with some of them now. Simon Pestridge, who went to work for Nike, got a very big job in Nike. And we text every now and again, and some of the pictures turn up. But it was funny, the big game, and that's the first time I ever saw a TSS shirt, was the big game at New Year's Day, was when all the expat kids came back from private schools in England and Australia, and they would form the overseas team, and I would coach the Hong Kong team. We'd never beaten the overseas team, and I was just thinking, right, I'm determined to beat these overseas schoolboys, going off to boarding schools. So we put a real big coaching program. I think we won by 2 points and everybody went nuts. But then someone told me afterwards that is the TSS shirt that, now I'm quite familiar with. And I suppose I've moved to the opposition now because I'm with the boarding schools.
Well, there you go. There's the sliding door moment I was about to open up and say, where did you first come across TSS? Because you'd met a few TSS parents who are expats over there. You obviously met a few referees because your team won, so you must have known the referee on the day. But you've come across some TSS people, but you probably weren't even aware where the school was in Australia. So how does TSS enter your life? Having seen the jersey in a barbarian side in Hong Kong, actually hold that question. Hong Kong Football Club, you walk down through the chute, there's photos of Bryan Hain everywhere as coaching, and there's also photos of Deb Hain. So how does Deb Hain enter your life?
Yes.
What was Deb's?
I got Debbie Parsons. We got to make sure I get that bit.
Exactly.
Hey, that's kind of funny because I was kind of set up with my college mates, and we just went back home. I went back home for college reunion, and a couple of my mates says kind of set me up with Debs, and we went out did some activities, and then I kind of said, well, if you're not doing anything, I don't think she was in a relationship at the time, and neither was I. And I said, if you're not doing anything, you ever want to come out to Hong Kong for a holiday? And I think she came with 2 suitcases and never went back. So it was kind of blind dating, and then, she just really got stuck into Hong Kong and made the most of it. But, this is a girl that loves doing marathons and running. And, I feel sorry at times that she was put through all that pollution running up Sai Kung and all those different areas.
Yeah, not a lifestyle conducive to
No.
exercise. Unless she fell in love with the long, dark hair, the mo, the photos you see there, the Bryan Hain, the Deb and Brian become a thing. When did you get married and where?
Oh, I think it was, when I was about 31, and we went back to Debs's town, and I had my Hong Kong mates and my Plymouth mates and her friends, and it was in her town, little English church. So it was, it was an old-fashioned wedding, 30 years ago now.
30 years.
So,
So Mr and Mrs Hain, back to our question around TSS enters your life at some point. So that's obviously a huge decision about, well, you learn about TSS. How does the idea of maybe moving to Australia? So you've told your folks you're moving to halfway across the world. Now you're considering moving all the way.
yeah. So I have a saying that sort of the more things you do, the more people you meet, the more doors open. All right. So I really wasn't planning to move to Australia, but I think of us, a lot of expats, when Hong Kong changed in 1997, we were kind of, are we going to stay? Or are we going to go back to Britain? And it was sort of fluctuating. But I met people because I became the director of coaching for Hong Kong. I wanted the best coaches from all over the world to come and do sessions. And I met Bryan Hain. And Bryan Hain was the innovator at the time with a lot of drills. Bryan Hain was a housemaster and a coach here. And Barry was running this tournament with about 60 teams at TSS. And he said, why don't you bring the Hong Kong under-19s to TSS? And I was coaching at the time, and I felt that they needed some experience outside Asia, and New Zealand was too tough. So we came here, and I'm looking at the field that we played on in one of Barry's tournaments, and we did quite well. And I met the Dean of Students, Gary Nusafora, and he wanted to do his level 3, finish off his level 3 coaching award. So he took the Hong Kong team that I'd had, and we got talking, and he said, did you ever think about moving down under? That's how it worked. Didn't even apply for the job. And I honestly was so naive, and I say this when I meet new students, is that I thought every school was like, well, not every school, but I thought schools, this is just typical of an Australian school, and the weather was like this.
Yeah. Wow. So the Hong Kong team you brought down was a representative team, or was it the Hong Kong?
No, represented to the Hong Kong under-19. So every year every other year we toured every year because here's a funny comment. I used to take the team. My wife was very understanding, especially when we had 3 young kids, and I'd say, you never know, this tour could lead to a job. And I kind of felt like, I think there was a time when Deb says, well, this tour better be what the one that leads to a job, but we were going to Taiwan, Korea, Thailand, Japan. We were traveling all over playing Asian rugby. And it's kind of something that you don't really realize in Australia, that if you're good at basketball, soccer, rugby, you can play anywhere in Asia, and it's great fun.
So you did skip ahead a little bit because it's not just a move for you and Debs. It's by that stage Rory's born. Then you have twin boys.
Yeah.
3 boys. Life must have been pretty hectic in Hong Kong. In an apartment, 2-bedroom.
It was a 3-bedroom apartment. So basically, we moved from the Hong Kong island onto Kowloon side up to Sai Kung, because the English Schools Foundation, I think, had about 13 schools. And basically accommodation was part of your package. And so if you wanted a bigger apartment, you had to move further away. So we moved up to Sai Kung, where the other racetrack is, and then Debs used to take the double buggy plus Rory and walk around Sai Kung racetrack, and that's where we were. And I used to ride a motorbike to work through a couple of tunnels. And then I think the pollution wasn't very good. And I think we just kind of realized that if we didn't move before the kids turned 5, we'd probably have been lifers.
Yeah.
No.
So you moved there, all 3 are under 5.
All yeah, 3 on 3, really. There were 3 and 1. And we moved here. And I kind of felt like we initially thought we'd be here for a couple of years, maybe 2-4 years, you know, and then make the move back. And it did take us a fair while to sort of settle in. But, you know, after a while, you know, what you've got to understand, you have to have an understanding wife in this job because you work 6 days a week, because you know, they're 12-hour Saturdays.
And
But then
Sunday sometimes.
Sunday sometimes. But then you get into this golden period where they get to the junior school and they were playing CIC, them, junior GPS, and you're in this wonderful position where you see your kids you can see them play every game, and it's those priceless moments. And Deb's, you know, bless her, used to be very active with the boys and just keep them on the move all the time. And I, you know, not trying to specialize in one thing, but just play as many different sports as possible.
Absolutely. I walk into my house, only with 4 kids. There is mess everywhere. I remember walking into yours with your young kids, and the house was just immaculate. How on earth did you just keep it so clean? Shoes off, like to think you had 3 boys under 3 at one point.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, well, I think I used to take them out. I've got some, because I've always enjoyed video and photographs, and I've got some classic photographs of big boxing gloves and gym and running around and shooting hoops and, you know, in the nets and all stuff. Yeah, keep them busy.
And your boys played a lot of different sports, which I think is great. We'll probably get to their journey at some point and the sports they got into. But I guess great time to ask you advice for parenting young kids. You know, I know you've recommended a book to me called Range and recommended playing lots of different sports. Is that something you encourage in the kids, or it just came naturally, or just evolved over time?
Yeah,
Sports.
just came naturally. And we didn't really push them into anything or one sport. I mean, it's funny because when I was learning to be a PE teacher, I was terrible at gymnastics. And if I could go through the whole session at uni without actually doing too much, I would, because I didn't like doing somersaults. And then I have a son that, you know, ended up being smaller than his twin brother, and he was actually quite good at gymnastics, you know, and I wasn't really that good at cricket. And I have another one that's good at, you know, kind of good at cricket. So we just did a bit of everything. And I think if I had one tip for parents, I kind of think it's just focus on the now. I see some parents of boys that are, you know, early developers or picked for a team, and it's very hard as a parent not to think about tomorrow. And, you know, or they could be making this rep team, or they could be doing that. And I kind of feel like my one tip is just enjoy today's game and today's results, because sport has this kind of sneaky way of pulling the rug out of under if you think you're going to win a premiership or if you're going to get to this next team.
It's a good level. It's a really good educator.
Yeah.
Because it teaches kids at a young age how to lose, how to treat decisions with respect and grace and all those things. So one boy starts to fall into rugby, one boy falls into gymnastics, one falls into cricket. I suppose really good time just for the boys' sake to have a conversation about the first Hain boy to score a century. Give George a bit of a rap here, should he?
Yeah, George. Yeah, it's kind of funny because George did get the first century out of the twins, and he was a bit smaller. He was a bit of a wicket keeper, and I think he actually regrets not sticking with the wicket keeping, but he was doing 2 things, and all parents will know when you get to about 15, that's where you make a call about what you're going to focus on. But he scored the first 100. And then I do remember when Sammy scored the first 100, which was at Brisbane Grammar, and I was stood next to Stephen Fryer, who is now the director of sport at Toowoomba, and, you know, and we're really good friends, you know, and you share the journey right through. Frizy was very good with Sammy's development. Yeah.
So you're pretty humble before George went on to be a very, very strong gymnast at school, but we've already become a very good rugby player, and Sam's obviously gone on to professional cricket. I guess there's a decisions boys make at certain times. Well, how did you find as a parent, or you and Deb as parents, when they started to finish school, about decisions post school around university, or do they continue with sport? Maybe each boy, how was that for Rory, then the twins, George and Sam? Because that's the challenge, right? You talked about sport at 15. There's also decisions around life. You probably sit back and go, how did all three boys end up in the different avenues they're in? You just supported them? Anything you and Debs did at that point in time when they started going, well, I want to be a professional rugby player? Was there a push to say, well, make sure you keep studying it? Because they've all become very successful in their own right. It just happens by osmosis. And
Yeah, look, I get to talk to a lot of parents, and I just listen sometimes to people. Some people's personality are different from mine. I suppose I've always been. I consider myself in my role as well as a parenting as a kind of facilitator, and I've not really, I end up on halfway around the world, and I thought to myself, I never really went back to Dad and asked his opinion on decisions, but he was always supportive of what I did. So I kind of didn't force them in any direction. And I kind of felt like TSS, or any GPS school gives you the best opportunity to explore different things. And maybe when I know now that, when you leave school, you don't ask students what they're going to be. You're going to say what you're going to start on, and then they're going to find their own niche. And I kind of felt like Rory, who got into engineering, was working on the bypass at Toowoomba, earning a good bit of money, finishing off his degree, and then sort of gets 1 year out and says, I think this is not for me. I think I want to wear a suit and I want to be finance. So that was interesting. Georgie ends up, going into law, and then it's what type of law, and you support him on the journey with that, and you're just proud whatever they do. And I even speak to parents now that their sons were in that kind of work and then have moved into building or doing other construction or whatever.
definitely, it's very common. They'll change within university 4 years,
Yeah.
change degrees, but also once they take off in a career, so it's not for me. It's a pretty agile world these days. And Sam ends up a cricketer. So let's come back to sort of TSS, probably get to the boys again in a moment, but you've managed to, we were doing some sums the other day. So TSS just won its 100th premiership. So when we won that rowing, which I didn't know until Jody Watson at the GPS said that, and I thought, wow. And so I looked back through the archives. When you turn up to TSS, we won 50. So in the last 30 years, we're 125 years this year, we've won half our premierships. How do you just keep evolving sports and you keep evolving in your role? Is it reading? Is it saying yes to everyone? Is it meeting people? Is it a combination? Is there anything you can put that down to, or is it just putting different amounts of time and energy and focus on certain sports at that particular time, and then once they're set up, it's easier? Is there anything?
That's not a short answer, but I really enjoy teaching and coaching, but what I get my greatest pleasure out is kind of putting people into place and setting up a scene where they can be successful. So I kind of felt like I do remember, and I was going to say this to you today, when I first arrived, I'd always thank Gary Nusafora for giving me the opportunity to work here. Obviously, Gary saw something in me at that time, or thought that we want a different approach. But I remember going through the Dixon Gates, and when I leave school every day, if I see a student, I'll say, how was your day? Give me a score out of 10. What was good about today? Just a bit of banter. And I was going through Dixon Gates after about 3 years, and I said, how was your day, boys? And they said, oh, we lost. I said, well, what sport was that? Basketball. And then another one said soccer. And then when I got into details with them, they'd lost every single game of that season and the previous year and the previous year. So they'd never won an actual game because we were not the biggest GPS school. So, a call out to Mike Partridge. I remember going to Wivenhoe when Mike Partridge, very good coach and chick, won the Head of the River in the Black Boat. And I remember seriously driving home all the way from Ipswich home saying TSS can win. It kind of kicked off that if we can win that, we can win other sports. And then the following year, we won the rugby, and that rugby kind of kicked it off. And it changed the boys' perspective of turning up on Saturday and not thinking they're going to win across a range of sports. And then we didn't have we had basketball courts on the cricket nets, and then we built the sports centre. And then you build the sports centre, it builds something, people will come, and in walks Dave Claxton, you know, a great guy, inspirational basketball man in Queensland. And then basketball takes off, you know, and you got, right, I got that one going, you know, and then you move focus to something else like football. There was an inkling that football and rugby was going to split. And I kind of thought, well, if it splits, that means there's going to be a lot of people playing football. We better get ahead of the game. So I went back to Keith Stevens was coaching the first, and he said, oh, there's this guy, Joe Dolan, that will meet you and he'll take you to 5 academies. And it's kind of this search for knowledge all the time, and you can keep learning. So we went to 5 of the biggest academies in London. Chelsea with 100 fields on the outskirts of London, West Ham, a bit like TSS, you know, great culture. Spurs, brilliant facilities. Crystal Palace, not so much. And I met all the directors of sport. Dermot Drummond at Chelsea, and I said, how can you know you've had a good year? You know, what determines you when you can go? And he said, when someone crosses the road, and the pros were on that side of the road and the academy was here. And he said, when one of my players crosses the road and plays professional football on that side, I know I've had a good year. And that saying's never left me, because at the end of the day, I want to win a premiership in every sport, but really I'm proud, and we're all proud of the boys that go on across the road and continue playing, whatever level.
We're going to talk about crossing the road in a minute, so that you've opened the door beautifully. Before we do, so you're not putting words in your mouth, but you feel probably the biggest change is getting the right person, and then everything floats around. Whether it's a director or a coach, you're saying people are.
Yeah, well, let's be simple, and you're good at this as well, but to be honest, I've kind of learned, and this is a bit of advice I gave to my boys, that when there's a job vacancy, you've got to look at 2 things. Is this really suiting you? Because you're quite proud that someone's reaching out and say, do you want to take this job? But really the company is trying to fill the job as quick as possible. You know, so you've got to try and make sure that the people coming in are going to fit with what we've got and being part of the team. And I remember with cricket, we waited. I saw Steve Baker and I was impressed with Steve Baker. And I waited 2 years, and we had 2 probably dodgy years, but I waited for him to be ready to come on board. And I just thought he was an enthusiastic person for the cricket program. I was a bit selfish as well, because I kind of knew that I had a couple of lads playing cricket, and I thought, well, you know, if we've got a great facility, let's get a director that's going to lift the profile.
100%. It's more than done that. An incredible run. You talked about knowledge and learning before we get to crossing the road. You've always been an avid reader. You meet a lot of people. You're constantly evolving. I did ask you before this. Probably the only question I asked Bryan before this was good book recommendations. Now, feel free to look at your notes. A couple of good books for anyone listening that's helped you, the perspective and knowledge.
A little bit of humor in this as well, but the 3 books I mention when I talk to new students is there's no such thing as average. It's average, I think the name of the book is, all right? And that really, the concept behind that book is everybody's different. So everybody's got qualities and everybody's got areas to develop. So in selection, when you're picking someone for a team, just depends what the coach is looking for or whatever that position. So, you know, it's a really good book because it says everybody is different. And the start of the book focuses on the development of jet airlines and how the seat got moved. And when they tested all the pilots in the USA Air Force, when they measured them, no one was the same. Everybody's different. So that was one. Every kid that comes to TSS, you've got positives, got to find them. Number 2 was luck. It's a book by Ed Smith in cricket, because some people just get a little bit of luck, and every now and again you get a little bit of bad luck. Somebody gets injured, you get in. Don't overestimate that opportunity because you've got to work hard. But that's a good book about luck. And the other one, which I think relates to TSS, is The Gold Mine Effect. And it's a book, and it goes around the world looking at centers of excellence and why have so many sprinters come from Jamaica, why have so many soccer players come from this club. But there's a good little story which I share with the parents, is that they're at this academy and there was 50 boys training, and they were there from the ages of 16 to 18. And the guy that wrote the book said, I want everybody to put write a name of the player that they think is going to make it, and in an envelope, and at the end of the 3-year cycle, we'll open up and see who was right, who can pick which boy. And when they opened up in 3 years' time, no one had written down the right name, because the player that made it was the groundsman's son. And the only reason he was allowed to train with the squad because Dad cut the grass. He wasn't in the squad. He was the smallest. He trained the hardest. He was out there when everybody else had gone. And I kind of say that, I kind of think of Matt Kuhneman then, because I've seen Matt Kuhneman grow up. And Matt was a small guy, but we've got a great culture down the cricket nets at the moment. The boys stay down there forever and they're practicing at lunchtime. Matty was that kind of kid, then gets a growth spurt after school and has got a skill that no one else has got.
Pretty rank haircut when he got his crank. Got his bag of greens. So we'll talk about crossing the road in a moment. Just before that, you met a lot of people, right? Parents, staff, professionals. Who's someone, and it can actually, I was going to say someone of note. I don't like using the word celebrity, but someone who's well known. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone you've met on your journey that's really impressed you. And what was it about them that impressed you?
He's passed away now, but George Simpkin was a New Zealander that coached Fiji, and he came to Hong Kong, and I worked alongside him, and we went and coached Hong Kong. We actually coached against Eddie Jones when I was coaching the backs in Hong Kong, and Eddie Jones is coaching Japan at the time. But he was probably one that first sort of said, opened my eyes. But then I've met people like Dave Allred, who's Johnny Wilkinson's kicking coach, who then could coach golf as well. And he is a smart guy. Then I meet someone like Wayne Goldsmith, still in touch with. He's probably one of the best in the world about parenting and sport and, giving the right advice. And Wayne is an innovator. I like people that are innovators, that are constantly developing new ideas. But you know what? I tell you one moment, because you go there. I say when you go out on a Saturday, you got to have kind of glasses on with 2 lenses. You're all watching your own son. But I remember stood next to Greg Cornelson, and it was under 11s, and Jack, and I think maybe Sam were both, George, playing in the same team. We're on the sideline, we're playing Nudgy, and at the end of the game, the whistle was blown, and Corny's walking straight across the field to the other side. And I thought, holy smoke, what's going to go on? He's not angry, is he? Because they've beaten us. And he walks up to the boy and the dad, and he shook the hands of the dad and the boy, and he just said, I thought your son was man of the match. And I'm kind of going, we're all watching our own son, and you want praise for your own son. And there he is, he's watching with 2 lenses on. That taught me a big lesson about seeing who's out on the field, who is the best player, and then trying to work out why that person's the best player.
Hell of a bloke, Greg Cornelson.
Oh.
That's something that stands out as how he'd always go and congratulate boys that deserved it.
Yeah.
Position team, amazing. So some big names there, those people. Correct me if I'm wrong, but George that you mentioned first is your son's namesake.
Yeah. Well, yes and no. In a way, George, we like the name, but because we were in an expat community, and we named our first. It's not easy being a teacher naming your sons, because you come up with a name and you go, Debs, he's not a great kid at school. So we came up with Rory, but every Rory I've met at TSS has been a live wire since. So, but then my English mate says, why did you pick a Scottish Celtic name? You got to make sure that your next ones are, so we chose George, very English for the next one.
Shout out to all the Rorys that we're talking about.
I don't mean every Rory. No.
All right, here we go. I'm going to put you on the spot here because it's the only time I ever have notes.
All right.
You see the notes, but you talked about crossing the road, and I can't think of too many schools that have had success like we have had. And so many boys have crossed the road in so many different sports. There are rugby schools, there are, football schools that are. We've done a reasonable job as a school over a long period of time, I guess, of boys crossing the road in a range of different sports. You're our director of sport, so your definition of an athlete has evolved and it'll be so unique. And keep in mind, one thing you've done an amazing job at is if we've been short, you've been the first person to jump in and help out. You've directed rugby, rowing, all sorts of sports, but you've directed our athletes, our athletics, track and field over the last few years and watched that evolve and improve out of sight. I guess your definition of what an athlete is at TSS has probably changed even in the last few years. So with all that in mind, we're going to play a little game called elimination. So I'm going to read out two names. You have to eliminate one. The person who stays in goes up against the next name that I read out. So
Okay.
a little practice run. So say the first two names I say are Bryan Hain and Deb Hain. Who gets eliminated? Who's the best athlete?
Well, Deb Hain.
Deb's.
Yeah, I'm a trier. Deb's dedicated.
All right, so no right or wrong answers, but at the end of this, we'll come up with, I guess maybe in your opinion,
Holy smoke. I'm going to upset quite a few people.
This is not going worldwide, by the way.
Wow.
It's not making worldwide news, but this is an interesting exercise for me. And I apologise if I've left some decent athletes off the list, but there were so many to choose from. So here we go. First two, looking out at the grandstand out here. Nathan Sharp, Duncan Free.
Well, seeing Sharpie gives you so much stick, I'm going to go with Duncan Free, our first gold medal.
Thank you. I was hoping you would say that. All right. Duncan Free, Matt Belcher.
Sorry, Duncan, but I'm going to go with Matt Belcher because I learned how difficult it is to represent Australia in sailing and his perseverance to actually get to the Olympics. So I've got to go with him.
All right, so both gold medalists at the Olympics. So we're going Matt Belcher, golfer Adam Scott.
Only a short time at TSS, Adam Scott. I kind of think consistency, long-serving athlete, go with Adam Scott.
Okay, Adam Scott comes up against the most capped Wallaby and Super Rugby player of all time, James Slipper.
Yeah, anybody that can play that long in the front row. James Slipper, Bond University came through. Yeah, I've got to go with James.
Okay, Slips. He's a prop now. He might struggle coming out. No offence, James Slipper. James Slipper, Shannon Eckstein. Surf lifesaver.
Yeah, and swimmer, GPS. I think I'm going to stick with Slips because, I won't share the reason why, but I think it might have been that he was focusing on surf lifesaving rather than GPS swimming at that time. So we'll leave it with that.
No more. Okay, Slips then goes up against world champion Courtney Atkinson, triathlete.
Yeah, I think both of them are inspirational people to meet, but let's just go. Having interviewed Courtney the other day, I kind of like the way that he is saying, get out there and go to places and keep moving. So we'll Courtney. Yep.
Okay. So Courtney, decent runner, swimmer and cyclist himself, goes up against Olympian Andrew Bailden, swimmer.
Yeah, I think I'll stick with Courtney on that one because the diversity of his activities.
On a side note, when you said the old basketball courts were out here, before we got the Centenary Centre, first time I'd ever heard of the bead test, my class, I was the grade above Courtney Atkinson and only went to level 17. So we all did the bead test and pulled out at whatever, level 9, 10, thinking we're heroes. Courtney Atkinson went to the end of the tape, went to 7. The first time I ever met Courtney Atkinson, absolute freak of an athlete. So Courtney then goes up against black cap, New Zealand international cricketer Blair Tickner.
Yeah, I kind of... I've just seen some footage of Blair. He had some speed as well. So good on him, actually, to go back home to New Zealand and make it over there. So let's go for Blair.
Okay, Blair. Now, because we've hit a cricketer, I need to say that I didn't put Sam on this list because I thought I'd pick Sam and so would you, and it'd be totally biased. So we're into the cricketers now. Blair Tickner goes up against Australian pace bowler Billy Stanlake.
Yeah, well, like Roscoe said, having them two in the same team. Look, poor old Billy. Poor old Billy's had a few injuries, so he's going to give me a hard time if I don't pick him. But I'm going to go with Blair at the moment.
Okay, that's all right. We can maybe tell a story about Billy after this, that when he trips on the...
Yeah. Well, me and Warren were good friends. Yeah, his dad. Yep.
All right, so Blair Tickner goes up against all-rounder Michael Neser.
Oh, there it is. Great catch. He cannot drop it or miss anything. Neser gets 5, and England are all out.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Blair, but that's where your run ends. Look, I do remember Nessa playing there, and even Sammy mentions being in the net with him, but Nessa's just one of those guys that I think everybody in Australian cricket loves. Yeah.
All right, so Ness then goes up against Major League Baseballer Trent Darrington.
Yeah, well, Trent was before my time, but I do know that Max has just represented Australia. Trent, and Trent's a good friend as well. So it's Trent or who?
It's Michael Neser or Trent Darrington.
Oh, well, sorry, Trent. I didn't teach you, so I'm going to stick with Nessa.
To apologise. So
No.
Michael Neser with his green cap goes up against dual international Matty Rogers.
Yeah, I think... holy smoke.
It's tough riding this.
Yeah, look, I think Matty Rogers kind of, put TSS rugby on the map to a certain degree, and a great relationship with Gary Nusafor at the time. So very appreciative of their opportunities. Let's go with Matty.
Okay, Matty Rogers. Somehow the worlds have collided. We've got two Matts now. So Matty Rogers goes up against Matt Kuhneman.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I've seen more of Matty develop. Left arm spinner. I'm gonna go right now because Matty's my kind of surprise package that I kind of like. That you can do it. Yeah.
Probably neither of us would have guessed he'd be the one that crossed the road and go so.
No, he wouldn't have been in my envelope. But I love and just like Matty Rogers, great supporter of TSS.
Very good supporter. So if you haven't seen his debut, jump on and have a look at the rudest haircut you've ever seen for anyone getting their baggy green. But so Matt Kuhneman then goes up against triple grand final winner Clark Keating for the Brisbane Lions.
Yeah, Clark was before my time. I think Clark played rugby at school as well. So yet again, basketball. Yet again, that's kind of it's more difficult to do it these days. Multi-sport develops your skills, vision. I'm going to stick with Matty Kuhneman.
Matty Kuhneman then goes up against Olympian John Lane.
Met John Lane. Yeah. I met John Lane. Went back and saw him. Decathlete. Sorry, Matty Kuhneman. I'm going to go with John Lane. Mainly because I kind of thought 10 different disciplines. And he said to me, he played on the wing because he was fast, but he said, I wish someone had taken me somewhere to explore the opportunities in track and field. It was we caught up in Sheffield. It was once again, you're learning off people that have, and a great coach now.
Yeah, 100%.
John Lane.
I put him in there because I knew he'd interest you as an athlete.
Yeah.
And an amazing athlete at that, and a great coach. So therefore, John Lane, potentially, well, he's definitely on the podium, but could get a gold medal here because the last name on the list is Xavier Bartlett. I thought we were going to have Matt Kuhneman against Xavier Bartlett. It's now John Lane, Xavier Bartlett.
Oh, another good athlete at the school. Look, I think everyone thought that he's a quick that was going to be a representative cricketer, and I think he's made the most of his opportunities. I don't know. Was it a medalist at the Commonwealth Games? Do you know what? I'm going to be sneaky and say fellow Pom went over to Britain on his own and trained. Maybe we'll finish off with John Lane.
Yeah, I reckon that's a nice way to finish. In terms of all-round athlete, that's pretty special. So let's just take a step back because you told me the story about Billy Stanley. You got to know his parents really well. They fly down. He's been told he's making his debut. You talked earlier about sport. You absolutely, in life, you need a bit of luck. Sometimes life throws you a bit of bad luck. They're all down there to watch the debut.
Yeah, look, there's two ways you view the story, because I remain close mates. The one thing about, I don't remember a lot of results of when our kids were growing up with Billy and Warren, and they own the corner shop they own the shop on Main Beach, and we used to pop down and we talk cricket and we're supportive. And then your son gets picked for Australia, and I would think that most parents out there would that is the golden moment. And Warren, we have a laugh about this, but yeah, so basically Warren, they fly down, they get to the MCG, they're playing India, they're playing in Sydney 2 days later, and Warren likes a beer like myself, and he says, I'm in the members bar, I've got the beer, I'm looking out thinking this is unreal, and then he sees that Billy's name's not on the team list, on the electronic scoreboard. So he rings Billy. Billy can't answer because there's no phones because of betting. Rings his son back in Main Beach, and he said Billy injured himself stepping on the rope in the warm-up. And he says, pretty bad. Then when I speak to Billy, when we interview Billy, Billy says, I really wanted to play, but it is blown up. And they thought about strapping it. And then you go, well, it could get worse. So in the end, he not only missed that game, he missed the Sydney game, and it was India. It was packed crowds. And he said the trouble was that there was a storm come through as well. He couldn't get his flights back. He ended up, the car was parked at Coolangatta Airport. He had to fly in on different flights with him and his wife in there. And he said, everything that possibly went wrong. And anybody else who says that, you kind of, or this is another little saying I say, is always keep 20% in reserve, because, it's good to enjoy the good moments, but you've got to have a little bit in reserve when that moment or something, or you don't get picked, and you've got to have a smile on your face.
Especially cricket. So let's go to cricket. So Rory ends up, they've both all got beautiful partners, you boys. Rory ends up, he's working down Melbourne.
Yep.
Georgie's a lawyer, very successful lawyer. And then Sammy takes on crossing the road in cricket. Two things I want to ask you. First one is, you and Deb, you're in the UK, you make a 50-50 decision. You're going to visit some countryside, or you go watch Sammy at one of his pro games. You decide to go and watch the game. What's it like when your son raises with all of the failure that cricket produces? And when I say failure, you know as well as I think you'd want to tell every 1 in 7 or 8 innings you're going to have a few runs. The rest of the time it's a slow drive home. You've been through every up and down. He's been to the other side of the world. What's it like when your son raises the bat, points the bat to you and Debs?
Well, I'll go back one step. I know where I was when I got a phone call off Ashley Giles, who was the coach of Warwickshire, and I was hitting golf balls at Carrara, a dark night, bit of rain, and the mobile goes and says, this is Ashley Giles, England cricketer as well, ended up, I think, being the manager or coach of England. And he says, we'd like to offer your son a contract. And you go, holy smoke. So that was an easy decision about whether to go back to England or to stay here and see what Australian cricket had to offer. I kind of took a keen interest on practice, and I kind of went, cricket's a pretty tough sport if you don't get into an academy, because you have limited chances of practice and playing in Australia. So but let's just talk about this one. We'd been home for a little bit of a holiday. I think it was our 25th wedding anniversary, and we had to go and see the family, and we got up, and I said to Debs, Trent Bridge is about an hour away, or we can go to Bath and we'll see your mum. I said, you know what, 4-day cricket, they might lose the toss, they're fielding for 2 days, you never know what's going to happen. I said, we've seen them, what do you want to do? And she said, oh, no, why don't we go and watch? And if a few get out, we might see them back for a little while. So anyway, we go up there. The toss goes in favour. Warwickshire batting. Plenty of seats in county cricket, so we're sat there. So we probably could see that we were there. And he gets into bat around lunchtime. And I'm so nervous. I'm terrible at watching, even here. I'm terrible. I don't move. I have a thing where I stay in the same seat, so I don't move. Anyway, he gets into the 50s. Then you can relax. And then he scores 100 and something. And
some front of him balls because there's plenty of air, and Haynes drives it down the ground for 4, and Sam Hain makes his 18th first-class century. It was a bit of a gift to him, really, from Felix Organ, a full toss. He takes his helmet off, kisses the Warwickshire badge, holds the helmet and the bat in the air.
that was pretty cool.
Unbelievable. So he marries an Aussie,
Yeah.
and what?
St Hilda's girl.
St Hilda's girl, absolutely. They have a beautiful little boy called Byron. What's it like to hold Byron?
Well, he does look a little bit like Sammy. I think she's put up with Sam, you know, in winters, and cricketers are away a lot, you know. So it's kind of like, you know, she's got young Byron now, which keeps her company, and they've got a nice little house on the outskirts of a little village on the outskirts of Birmingham, in a nice little quaint village, actually. So, you know, it's pretty cool having our first grandson, you know, and hopefully at the end of the career, they'll move back on the Gold Coast. Yeah.
Yeah, well, he went on exchange. So my second question, sorry, I went down a rabbit hole with little Byron because I couldn't stop thinking of him. So back on my second question about cricket, one was, what's it like to see your son raise the bat in professional cricket? He went on exchange in year 9 to Loretto in Scotland. That's actually where Jock Campbell went as well. So Jock ended up playing for the Reds against British.
Is that right?
And they claimed him. They claimed Jock Campbell. They said, oh boy, Jock Campbell. So they probably did the same for Sam when he made his cricket debut. But he then went back and forth to Warwickshire, probably an each way bet. Does he go through the Australian program or have a crack in the UK? Massive decision. Bit of luck goes his way, gets the Warwickshire contract because he's done such a good job. He's worked his backside off to get there. I knew he'd had a contract before you told me, because every time he'd come back, he had he was living with a family for the first few years and probably not getting paid much. And the next time he came back, he had Ray-Bans and a tag watch. And I said, pretty sure Sammy's got a contract. Anyway, I digress. But all of that sacrifice to go to the UK, to play cricket on his own, and his girlfriend moves over at the time, they're now married. What's it like to see Hain on the back of an international cricket shirt?
Let's just go back one step, because most people, if you're watching this all the way through, is Andy's mother-in-law knew my wife and came up to them just passing, and they said that Loretto, Scotland, I think her husband's ex-school, Loretto, exchange. Do you think Sammy want to go? He plays quite good cricket, she said. And Deb said straight away, oh, Sammy's a bit of a home bird. I'm not sure he really would want to do that. So we just asked him, and that kicked it all off, because it happened to be the coach of Loretto was the ex-captain of Warwickshire. But, you know, probably putting that in there as a parent, I made sure I did all the research I could do to make sure that I wasn't sending him, not to an English school or Scottish school, but to make sure the person that was having the interaction with him. And I saw this quote in the Birmingham Mail saying, you could not meet a better person than Michael Powell, who's now the director of cricket at rugby schools. So I kind of always felt like anybody that's going to come in and work at TSS, they have to be a really good person. But going back to the final thing, it's funny that he got the call up for England, and there'd been a lot of press saying the Hain train, you know, probably should have played for England earlier, but, you know, that's where luck plays a part. And, you know, there's a pretty good player in Joe Root that seems to be in that position that Sammy was aiming for. But we were on the Rugby World Cup tour, and he gets picked, and I was in France at the time, and AB and Ty said, and Damien Mednes, he is a legend. He goes, Hain, you got to go. So the boys carried on the tour, and I slipped across the channel and was there. It was pretty special to see the cap. Yeah.
And I suspect that's his debut shirt that hangs in your
Yeah.
office.
Yeah.
Hain 17, have I got that right?
It could be 17. Yeah.
15 or 17. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right, so you've gone the full journey. So going near on an hour here, so I won't take too much more time up. You've had an interesting journey. You've done a lot, but you've nearly done 3 decades here at TSS. So the gravity of answer you give has a lot of weight to it. 2 parts to the question, or I guess 2 audiences to the question. So I'll ask it in 2 different ways. If I'm a new boy arriving at TSS, what's your advice for a young kid, regardless of what their interests are outside the classroom? What's your advice?
I think the one thing that the school does very well is we're not too big, and basically we do a really good job. You're surrounded by people that encourage you to have a crack and have a go, all right, and try things. Okay, that's number one. Number two, I always think assemblies, whether you're on stage or watching, I look at the boys, and they take great interest of the boys that are crossing the stage, and I kind of feel like it's sort of inbred in a TSS boy. If he can do it, why can't I? And it's in the way we mix through the ages in sports like rowing, or the ages, there's all sorts of ages training on a particular day, and the mixture of ages, even the young guys across the road walking out with the soccer teams, we encourage the next generation to have a go. I think if I'd said one thing these days is that the mobile phone is so addictive to absorbing your time sat in a chair. And I will still remember driving out Luke Evans in here on Sunday morning kicking goals. Use your time wisely, because it goes so quickly.
Phones are time robbers, but you're so right. You think of all the champions we've had, anyone I've read on that list, you always have memories of them outside of the times they needed to be here. They were here training really hard. Love the point. If you can't see it, you can't be it. And I think we do a reasonable, well, most schools do a good job of that, for the little guys to see what it takes to be a champion, walk across the stage. So the second part to that question is for a parent, whether it's a new parent or a parent whose son is starting to do well in STEM, in chemistry, or showing a liking to cricket or sailing. What's your advice for a parent coming through?
Yeah, but I probably think on the pathway and the mixture with this one, you've joined a GPS school, and I call it the Premier League of schoolboy sport, because I've been back to Britain quite a few times, and they have all the matches playing at 3 o'clock because some of them have morning school. I kind of go, this is, a pretty special environment. They're all 9 different schools. We all kind of get on well with each other, but we appreciate our differences. You're in a great environment that encourages people to aspire to be the best person. And it doesn't matter what team they're in. And I kind of say to parents that sometimes I just don't look at the result. I look beyond, and if your son is having fun and smiling and in laughter with the guys they're around, I sometimes, like I say, I don't remember many of the results. I just know, make friends with other parents and enjoy the journey and just focus on today. And I remember that saying, that our oldest old boy said about, life's a gift, isn't it? What was that saying he said?
That's why they call it the present.
Yeah.
Geoff Bell.
Geoffrey Bell, tomorrow doesn't exist, but so basically that would be it, to just enjoy the now.
Well, that's good advice. Who's someone I should interview for the podcast?
That's very good. Well, I think someone is going through the journey at the moment. We have such a great team of people here, and I like talking to Mendo, who's, you know, with the Ashes and been there as a person that's crossed the road, but someone that's basically living it as a dad and a great mentor to our basketballers. I think Mr. Petrie, you know, he's someone I go to as well. He's played professional sport, played for Australia late, but daughter's in the system. Yeah, I think he's a good one to interview next.
Definitely on the list. So you're a legend, Haney. You're a good human being. You've been a great mentor to me and to lots of parents coming through. So good with young adolescent boys. I think that's the most important thing. You're a great mentor for young men, and you, whether they cross the road or not, or if they cross the road into sport or to law or engineering, whatever that is, you're so supportive of those boys. You're an absolute legend. So nice to sit down with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed it. Got me a bit teary on the 100.
I started getting to it. It's hard to move on. Couldn't keep